Hey guys, I'm Randy Unger, and it's a very special edition of Under the Radar where we talk all things film. And I have with me tonight a very special guest, podcaster, Mr. Mike White of The Projection Booth. Great podcast, all about film and film analysis. It's a wonderful show. Welcome to my show, Mike. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, this is very cool. So I found out about the podcast. It instantly drew me in, and I felt I needed to talk to this guy. You're a movie buff. I'm a movie buff. We're in the same world, and I figured it was just meant to be in a way. So I'm very happy that you're here with me. So thank you.
Well, thank you again.
Sure, sure. Um, so the projection booth, tell everybody about the podcast. How did it start? And a little history.
Apparently, there's some controversy about how it started because I remember it one way. My former podcast partner remembers it another way. He remembers it that I suggested that we do a podcast. I remember him suggesting that we do a podcast or suggesting to him. But between the two of us, we ended up coming up with the show and just kind of said, all right, what are we hearing in shows that we like, that we don't like, and just tried to customize our show to be something a little bit different, just talking about movies, not really getting into the what did you watch this week type of thing, and just kind of cut right to the chase, give a little intro to the movie, talk about where it fits into history, try to get some interviews if we possibly can, and then just try to create the best darn show we possibly could. And that started going on 12 years ago. Now we're having our 12th
Oh
anniversary
wow.
in March 2023.
Awesome. Congrats. That's very
Thank you.
exciting. Yeah. So wow, 12 years. I've been doing my show about 7 years now.
Oh,
So
that's great.
yeah, but before that, I was actually a writer. I wrote reviews and entertainment pieces, but I was more drawn to the broadcast side of journalism,
Mhm.
as I imagine you do. What did you do before the podcast? I'm curious.
So before the podcast, I used to do a zine, a little homemade. Well, I can't say little homemade because by the end it was actually professionally printed, full color cover, all this kind of stuff. But it started off as, being Xeroxed and written late at night when I was working at a cable company.
Hmm.
And hey, I had access to the Xerox machine, and then when I was working at Blockbuster during the day, I had access to the stamper, where you just put the mail in. So I was able
Right.
to mail out issues for free. So a
Okay.
little corporate espionage never hurt anybody. So, but yeah, that's what I did from gosh 94 to maybe 2016 something. I mean,
Really?
I only did like not even 20 issues because they would come out about once a year for a while there. But yeah, total labor of love and just writing about films. And I had a whole bunch of folks that were contributing articles. So that was fantastic. And, I've always just been about movies and kind of sharing the love and sharing titles that maybe people might have missed or forgotten about and just trying to shed a light on those a little bit.
Okay. And whatever came of that zine.
So I quit doing it when print got really super expensive.
Okay.
I ended up put together a collection of kind of the best of articles. Revisited some of them because I'd written about certain subjects throughout, 4 or 5 issues. So I was able to combine those into one article, one giant article, but but a few chapters of stuff, and that's in a collection called Impossibly Funky, Cashier's to Cinemark collection,
Hmm.
and that came out in 2011, I want to say. And
Okay.
then I was on a book tour, and there was I was down in Baltimore at Atomic Books, and there was a little placard on the cash register talking about the revenge of print, they were calling it.
Okay.
And they said all old zinesters were asking you to come back for one more issue and create it like you used to in the old days. So the photocopies,
Huh.
no desktop printing, any of this kind of stuff. So I
Um,
did one of those. And then I said, this is still so much fun. I did two print on demand issues through Lulu Press.
Hmm.
And yeah, and then after that, I was just like, I'm spending way too much time on the podcast. I can't do the zine at the
Right.
same time because I also work a day job.
Right, as we all do in this field, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but all right, so the zine that lasted a pretty long time, so that's very
Yeah.
impressive, very cool. Um, so the podcast, the projection booth. So you said you take a unique stand on film analysis. What makes it so unique?
I think a lot of it is just that I try to do a ton of research if I possibly can and just find out as much as I can about the movies that we're talking about. Try to put stuff into more historical context. So it's not just, is this movie good or bad?
Right.
Why is it good or bad? But it's more like, hey, what was happening at the time? Why is this movie the way that it is? How does it reflect the time in which it was made?
Hmm.
Let's talk about the filmmakers behind it. Let's talk about the writers, the actors, the production. Try to paint a little bit more of a fuller picture with that. And then also, if we're talking about a particular film, we'll talk about the script for it. We'll talk about what it might have looked like. And then we'll talk about if there's any remakes or sequels or anything like that. And just try to give, again, that fuller picture to something. So try
Uh,
not to just be like, a couple chuckleheads, just like, oh, look at that goofy movie.
right, right, right. No, you're breaking out down the film and you're approaching it from all angles, it seems, which
Trying to, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I'm sure there's some angles that you missed, because there's so many. Depends on the film, especially, but yeah, I love the fact that you're combining film critique with like sociology. That's a very interesting mix, and yeah, it's a very unique voice that you've established. So,
Oh,
congrats on
thanks, thanks.
that.
Yeah, when I went to University of Michigan for film and video, I always say that they're more of a film theory school than a filmmaking school.
Mm,
So I really got off on reading things like, about Lacanian theory or Freudian theory and just
mm,
how you can reinterpret a film or read a film in a different way. And that's what I like to bring to some of these movies as well. Just like, well, what if we flip everything? What if this is actually a dream? What's actually reality? How does this, meet our psychological needs? So I try not to get too heady about things. We still talk about, I just did an episode about Orgasmo, the Trey Parker film. So it's not like we're all, it's not Barbet Schroeder and all these kind of filmmakers all the time, but I do really enjoy getting in and diving into a movie that might be a little bit more difficult, like on the Silver Globe or something where it's like, okay, why is this movie the way that it is? What
mm,
can we make of it? I love what they call puzzle films. So
mm,
just like last year at Marion Bad or Mulholland Drive, and just
yeah.
like, all right, what can we bring to this?
Mm,
How do you interpret this? How do I interpret it? And then what's really nice is I've got a pretty good group of co-hosts
mhm.
that I love to have on the show, and you get these different perspectives from different people. And it's kind of like a little cocktail party where you never
Right.
know how folks are going to get along, what they're going to bring to the party. It's kind of nice that way. It's always a surprise for me as well.
So I do a panel discussion as well on my show. That's like the main format. And it really is a treat when I have people bringing something different to the table. And, we all learn from each other every
Oh
episode.
yeah.
I'm learning from you right now, actually. So it's an ongoing process of enlightenment, education in film, and yeah, I love the idea of a cocktail party that's just discussing film. Even in my day job, I I discuss movies with my coworkers,
Yep.
except there's no camera or microphone. That's the but the passion is always there, and I could definitely see it in you as well.
Well,
Um,
thanks.
yeah, yeah. And so it seems like you are pretty random with your movie selection.
Yeah, yeah. I always say we try to cover everything from the art house to the outhouse, and uh, sometimes it's just a matter of who can I get for an interview or what's just plain interesting, or I've got my Patreon folks will suggest movies and I'll cover those throughout the year. So yeah, it's kind of an eclectic mix. I try to do theme months if I can. So like every September we call it Czechtember and we talk about Czechoslovakian films.
Okay.
We usually try to do like a Noirvember in November, a Shocktober in October, and then we've been doing Sci-Fi July for the last few years, and that seems to be working out. But we'll go off and on. Like I'm doing a whole series of French films coming up. There's no rhyme or reason other than I want to talk about L'Age d'Or, and then I was like, all right, well, I'd like to talk about Matrice. Oh, and I'd like to talk about Bob Laflambert, and I'd like to talk about this. So
Right.
it just all combined and became a French month. But yeah, it does look random, but kind of like Dr. Lecter says, isn't this, you know, desperately random?
Right. There's a method to your madness, I see.
Yes, yes.
Excellent, excellent. Now you briefly mentioned interviewing talent, and I definitely see that you have an impressive list of guests that have been interviewed by you. What were some of the highlights? Who are some of your standout interviewees?
Oh gosh. I mean, there are times where I get a little flustered talking with people just because I'm so excited to talk with them.
Yeah.
So, trying to keep my cool when I'm talking to like a Jeff Goldblum or an Elliot Gould or William Friedkin or Peter Bogdanovich. And then you get the ones where you're just like, well, I'm not sure how exactly this is going to go. Like we spoke to character actor John Polito a few years ago.
Oh yeah.
And yeah,
He
and
was in a
we're
bunch of Coen Brothers films, right? Yeah.
exactly,
Right,
yeah, yeah.
right,
He's the guy that talks about giving him the hi hat. Yeah,
right.
and I was talking to him about The Rocketeer. He was in that one,
Right.
and we started off, and there was a little bit of hesitation. And I was just like, "Well, you really remind me of this other character actor from Touch of Evil," and he was just like, "Oh." I tried to model my career after this guy. And then next thing I know, he's just like, is this sound quality good enough? Do you want to call me back on my personal phone? I was just like, wow, okay, John. And he was just became the most gregarious and nicest guy. I mean, he was nice before, but he was just like way opened up and he was just
Yeah.
ready to talk about anything. And I find that a lot of character actors are just they have the stories, man. Like Mike Starr, who's just been in a ton of stuff, Goodfellas, Dumb and Dumber. I
Mhm.
mean, the
Oh
stories
yeah.
that that guy can tell. Oh my goodness. When he told me about, I mean, he's got that tiny little role as
Uh-huh.
Frenchie in Goodfellas, and he's telling me the meaning behind every single line, and that he's like, "Oh yeah, when I say that I'm the commandant, I knew that Hogan's Heroes was around at that point, so I was making a reference to Hogan's Heroes." I was like, "Wow, I never would have thought that you put that much thought into this role, but it's amazing."
That's so cool. Yeah, it's very random, especially living in New York. I was on the subway once, and there was a very familiar face sitting across from me, and it was actually an actor who was in an episode of Seinfeld. Uh,
Oh wow.
yeah, there was an episode where a scene where Jerry did not let this guy into his building. He didn't know who he was, so he wouldn't let him in. And if he finds out later on that he actually does live in the building, he lives like on Jerry's floor and like just
Oh
a few
God.
floors down. So, and I was talking to him for a few minutes until his stop, and he was like so gracious and happy that I acknowledged a role that he did in one episode of a show from over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's a really special feeling. It's like a mutual feeling when you recognize great work, especially from like 20, 30 years ago.
Oh
And
yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a
um,
really nice connection. And then one of the nicest things is that there have been some people that I've had on the show where it's like, do you want to come back as a co-host sometimes and just talk about a movie? And
nice.
Scott Frank, who wrote Minority Report and Logan, and he just had Queen's Gambit. He was just like, yeah, sure, just give me a call. And we had him on. We talked about They Shoot Horses, Don't They? And it was just
Okay.
like great. Or we've had Vincenzo Natali, who did well, so many things, but mostly people would know him from Splice or Cube. And he's
Mm,
been on the show just a ton of times. He's so fun to talk with.
that's
And it's just like you get a different perspective from the actual filmmakers that are, in the trenches,
right.
and then them coming to something and being like, oh, well, I would have done it like this. Or, you get that kind of vibe from them.
I love that you flip your guests into critics. Like,
Yeah.
I love that idea. I never really thought of doing that, but yeah, that's actually a very smart tactic. Not tactic, but
Yeah.
uh, technique rather. That's awesome. What was Jeff Goldblum like?
Oh, he was amazing. I still don't know if he knows that I'm this Mike White rather than the guy from White Lotus, Mike White.
Right. I
But I
did
think
Google
he,
you, and it hit that guy popped up a lot.
of course, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah. It's like, this isn't the right guy. No.
Yeah, yeah. I know for sure I've spoken to some filmmakers who have thought that I was the other Mike White. I've had one who's just like, well, you know how it is. And, when he asked where I'm located, I'm like just outside of Detroit. He's like, oh, really? Oh, I thought you were here in the city. And I was just like,
Yeah.
No, you're thinking of the other guy, but I'm not going to dissuade you right now. I'm going to wait till this interview is over.
It reminds me of the scene in Office Space with Michael Bolton.
Oh, yeah. I celebrate his whole catalog.
Yeah, yeah. I am a Michael Bolton fan. That's hilarious. I love that. So with the projection booth, what exactly do you hope listeners take away from this podcast?
I just hope that they can take away some good stories from the folks that we interview, maybe think about things a little bit differently. But really, the biggest thing is just to come away with some recommendations of different movies. I mean, we do try to cover some unusual things. We every once in a while we'll talk about a pretty mainstream movie like your Total Recall or Demolition Man, or some of the action films that I grew up loving, Commando, those kind of things. And then we'll go out there and it's like Message from Space, or Message from the Future, this very obscure
Mm,
Israeli film, which was, I think that one was shot in English, but I mean, it's just this absolutely bizarro movie.
mm.
You might still be able to find it on YouTube.
Okay.
And it's like, yeah, here's a great movie that you should probably check out. Or, just last week we talked about a film from Christopher St. John called Top of the Heap,
Okay.
which has played at Brooklyn Academy of Music, was out on Blu-ray for a limited time, but it went quickly out of print. It's a fantastic movie that more people need to check out, and I'm
Right.
hoping that just by talking about it, people will be intrigued enough to say, I really need to see this thing.
Right. And I mean, I definitely am trying to brush up on my obscure film knowledge. And the titles you've just listed, I'm formulating a list in my head right now of every.
Nice.
Yeah. I try to watch the more obscure stuff. I try to watch as much as I can. Obviously, with a day job, it's not that easy.
It's
So
tough.
yeah, I try to do the best I can. But yeah, those are some great titles that you put out there. So what would be your top three of all time? Top three favorite films?
Oh gosh. I think number one, and I always say this just because I had such a great time watching this movie when I was growing up, and it was one of those that myself and my high school friends glommed onto, and we would watch it all the time, assigned each other roles. It was almost like a Rocky Horror type thing, but not quite as extreme. We didn't dress up. But the movie Black Shampoo from Graydon Clark, 1976, is just
Okay.
this amazing exploitation film. Hairdresser on the Sunset Strip falls in love with his secretary, who then gets kidnapped by the mob, and he has to rescue her with pool cues, chainsaws, whatever it takes.
Well,
Fantastic.
what? Wow, wow. That's a mouthful. What year was that?
76.
76. Okay, so Black exploitation.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. That you would say that's your number one.
That's got to be the number one. Sorry to come right out of the gate with the number one.
No,
Like
no.
I probably should have saved that one,
Yeah,
but
it's okay.
yeah.
That's, you can obviously see what my favorite film is.
Yes, I love it.
But there's no room for Ghostbusters, which is tied with the trilogy of Back to the Future.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Well, Back to the Future is definitely stronger when it comes to the numbers. I'm not that huge of a fan of two. I really like three, and of course, one can't be touched. But you get into the Ghostbusters movies and you just fall right off a cliff after that first one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm biased because the second movie was the first movie I remember ever seeing. I was 4 years
Oh,
old.
wow.
So
Nice.
for sentimental reasons. Also, I don't know if you know, I am a member of the charity group, the New York City Ghostbusters.
Oh,
Um,
I did read that you were
okay,
a
good. Yeah.
Ghostbuster. Yes.
So it's definitely in my DNA. But yeah, Back to the Future is just a really I consider the whole trilogy to just be one great big ride and
Hmm.
one wonderful movie. But enough about me.
So yeah, the
So
other two
yeah.
films, I mean, those can change up whenever.
Mhm.
So, you know, Goodfellas one day or The Godfather, and then you go to like, your Reservoir Dogs, or,
Mm.
even like things that we've covered on the show, like John Pace's Crime Wave is another favorite that I can just watch whenever. Or even a classic movie like Maltese Falcon or something. I mean, it's no holds barred. Whatever, it changes all the time. If I were stuck on a desert island, first I would be very thankful if I had electricity to run a VCR and
Oh
watch
yeah,
stuff off of stuff. But hey, yeah, it would be very tough for me to select movies to watch on a desert island.
I know. And hopefully you'll have the internet on that island. That would
Yeah, it'd
help.
be nice too, because
Yeah.
otherwise I'd be saying, "Who's that actor? What else were they in?"
Yeah.
Yeah,
IMDb right now.
right.
Um, so obviously you're big on film noir, which I wholeheartedly respect. Um, do you love the older stuff? You mentioned Maltese Falcon. How about the works of the late great Billy Wilder?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We actually covered, I think, three of his films last year. It was kind of an odd Wilder time. Actually, it was one film that he wrote. We covered Ball of Fire.
Mm.
We talked about Buddy Buddy, one of his later films,
Right.
and then we talked about the classic of all, Sunset Boulevard, which was just so
Yes.
much fun to finally talk about. There are so many things that are just kind of on this like Mount Rushmore of things we have yet to talk about. So things like the Godfather films, like Goodfellas, there just certain things where it's just like, oh, I love this movie so much that when I do it, I want to make it really super special. So
Right.
when it came to Sunset Boulevard, it's like, okay, somebody had just put out a brand new book about it. My a friend of mine, Jeffrey Schwarzy, directed a movie, a documentary about the musical version of Sunset Boulevard, not the Andrew
Right.
Lloyd Webber one. There was another one that was
Wasn't
supposed to happen.
Oh, was Glenn Close in one of those?
That was the Andrew Lloyd Webber one. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Gotcha,
Yeah,
gotcha.
but yeah, like while Gloria Swanson was alive, like even just right after the movie came out,
Hmm.
she wanted to have a musical version of it, and she hired these two songwriters to work with her.
Okay.
She ends up having an affair with one of them, and you get to like hear the whole stories of all of these people. This was just an amazing documentary. It's called Boulevard, so I
Okay,
definitely recommend it.
cool. I'm gonna check that one out.
Yeah.
And another great Wilder film, Double Indemnity.
Oh yeah.
It's so
Yeah,
good.
that was so much fun to talk about. We talked about that a few years ago. My friend Kat Ellinger, and then the director, I think Keith Gordon was on that episode as well.
Hmm.
And then we watched the we watched the Indian version of it, which I think was, of all the titles, it was JISM. And I'm just like, really? Jism is the name of your movie?
God,
So that was pretty
that's
interesting.
unfortunate. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Gotcha. Did you say it was Noir November? Was that one of the
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll do November. Yeah. I don't
Nice.
think we're doing it this year. I think I'm doing some listener requests this month, but for every other year for the last 11 years, I think we've done a November. So this coming up next year, I just got a whole big collection of noirs that I got from the NoirCon that takes place in Philadelphia
Huh.
every couple of years.
Okay.
They came back this year as a virtual conference because they had been canceled the last few years for COVID.
Okay.
And I bid on an auction and got this whole collection of noir films. I'm like, great,
Oh my
more
gosh.
things to watch,
Yeah.
as if I don't have enough.
So it was like a bundle, like a bunch of movies.
It was a box that came that was just like stacked, just stuffed full with noir films, all
Oh,
on Blu-ray. Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Did you go to that convention in person ever?
I did when it was available. Yeah, that was
Nice.
really nice. It started off as Goodis Con, all about David Goodis, the
Okay.
old pulp writer,
Okay.
and then it switched over to NoirCon to be a little bit more general. And
Oh.
I think they had three or four in-person ones, and then they were supposed to move from Philly to LA,
Hmm.
but that was 2020. And
Okay.
it was, it was April of 2020 when they canceled it. And I was just like, come on, guys, by September, this will all blow over, right? It'll all be fine. So,
Yeah.
yes, they did the right thing and they canceled
Okay.
it. And I think they're going to try to go back to in person, hopefully next year, or the year after, because they usually do it every 2 years.
Okay. Well, let me know. Keep me posted with that. I
Yeah,
would definitely check that out for sure.
it's pretty fantastic. It's what's really nice is that it's just a whole lot of writers, whole lot of fans, filmmakers, that kind of stuff, and just
Right.
people just who all really like hard-boiled mysteries, films noir, and just we all have this shared interest, and nobody's like a hoity-toity, I'm too good to talk to you. Everybody's just folks, which is really nice.
And do they have like stars from the classic film noir films?
No, no, they might have more like some of the writers.
Right. Yeah. Writers.
Yeah, so like George Pelicanos, who did what was that, Band of Brothers? I can't remember if he worked on The Wire or not, but he was one of the speakers one year.
Hmm.
Yeah, they'll get people that you actually know their names, and then a lot of other writers where they're just really doing some great work. Maybe they're not the most well-known writer, at least to the general public, but in the mystery circles, they're winning awards, which is great.
Cool. Yeah, because I have a lot of writer friends. I have one in particular. I'm definitely going to mention this convention too. I think it's right up his alley. Uh,
Cool.
yeah, that's cool. So obviously, from your background, you definitely are into physical media. You have a bunch of DVDs, Blu-rays. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. Used to have VHS tapes at the wazoo.
yeah. Some of my favorite memories are as a kid, we're going to the VHS store, the video stores, and just seeing all the walls and walls of VHSs and picking out what that Friday night movie was going to be. That was just
Nice.
so exciting. Um,
That's the thing that we really miss these days is being able to browse and look at those titles, talk with other people. I worked at a video store for years and years, and just that
right.
whole interaction that you have with the customers where it's like, what would you recommend? I'm looking for something like this. I really like this movie, and just trying to get a
That's
beat on them and give them something they've never seen before. I guess I still like to do
you're
that.
you're still doing that through your
Yeah.
podcast. So, and I actually did work at Blockbuster. I know you did. You probably worked there a little bit longer than I did. I was only there for 1 month.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
it was not the greatest job,
No, no.
but the best part of it was recommending titles and getting the screeners. That was fun.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
but that damn computer screen, that blue and yellow screen, it was not a good fit for me. But I'm sure you had more success at Blockbuster than I did.
Well, what was really nice was the days when it was just me on staff and I was able to put whatever I wanted into the machines and play them and not really have to worry about too many customers. And that's how I experienced a lot of spaghetti westerns. I would
Okay.
watch them that way and then take them home and really watch them kind of thing. But yeah, we had a really big Clint Eastwood section at one of the stores that I worked at. So I would
Nice.
just go through all the Clint Eastwood films, and that's what really got me turned on to spaghetti westerns. It was
Cool.
such a great starter. And then, yeah, there's another one that I worked at that had this amazing foreign section, including pretty much every film that Almodovar had made
Hmm.
up to Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down, other than Dark Habits, and everything else was there. So we just, this was when I was in college, and we would
Hmm.
watch all these films, like bunch of gay Spanish films, bunch of straight white guys in Ann Arbor watching gay Spanish films and just having a great time with it.
Why not?
Yeah, exactly.
But to go back to the physical media and that experience of just being there, you can't compare that to anything else.
No,
And it's so sad that society is just it's everything today is just streaming. And we have lost that personal sense of awe and wonder of beautiful art. It's like it's not even
exactly.
there. It's just in a button right now on your remote control. That's it. And
Yeah.
it's a shame, but I'm really hoping that things will get better in terms of that selection process, and
Hmm.
because I think people have become a little bit more lazy in their viewing and their
Oh,
selecting. Um,
definitely.
But aside from people like us who we treasure that, we treasure film so much. So my next question, how do you feel about originality now in the film industry? Do you think it's kind of just sequels, requels,
I mean,
spin-off?
we definitely go through phases.
Yeah,
I remember, gosh, years and years ago, there was one summer, I think it was like the year that the third Shrek was coming out, and like everything else that summer was sequels,
yeah,
remakes, adaptations of TV shows when that was still pretty big. And this year's kind of the same thing. So many of the movies that we're excited about, there's a new Ghostbusters film coming out at the end of the year. I'm sure you know that one. You've got the new Indiana Jones. You've got all this stuff, and like, yeah, we're continuing on with like phase 4 or 5, whatever it is, of Marvel.
right.
So you've got all of this stuff, and it's just like, yeah, where's that original stuff? But when those
Yeah,
original films do come out, they just
right,
shine so much
right.
for me. And whether it's something really kind of crappy looking like that Adam Driver film 65,
Oh yeah,
I'm dying to see that.
yeah.
I'm really excited. It looks so cheesy, but it
Because
looks right up my
because
street.
Driver is a really good actor, and you want to see
Yeah.
what adventure he's going to go on. For me, I rely on star power and directors. That's what I look
Hmm.
at first and foremost. If I love the actors in it, if I love the direction, I'm drawn to that type of movie. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. It's not always a successful recipe. But
Right.
I'm optimistic about some of the films that are coming out. Uh, this past year we had some really original films like Everything Everywhere All at Once. Was
Yeah.
phenomenal. So you really and The Whale, these are just amazing, amazing movies. But you kind of have to search for them a little bit.
Hmm.
Especially if you're a modern moviegoer, they're not gonna go to the Cineplex and request The Whale right off the bat.
Right.
So they have to be recommended by people like us, or they have to they'll find out about it randomly somehow when they're searching for it on Netflix. So
Yeah.
it's a shame, but there is originality out there, but you have to search for it. You really have to dig deep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Well, one nice thing, one of the silver linings of the kind of collapse of theaters and the rebuilding after COVID
mm,
is that it's so much easier now to see Indian films, to see Chinese films, to see these films that you wouldn't normally see at just a regular, I live in the suburbs, be able to see these films in the suburbs is
right.
amazing.
Mhm.
I think they're showing The Wandering Earth 2 over at the AMC theater. They're showing a bunch of Indian films, both Telugu and Hindi, over at the usual theater that I go to. And it's like, okay, we're making room for these. One
Yeah,
of it is that we don't have as much product, quote unquote,
right.
but we have room now for all of these different films, and we're actually seeing, oh, there's an audience, there's actually a lot of Indian people that live in this area and they'll go see these films. There are a
Mm,
lot of Asian people that will see the Chinese films, but I get to enjoy that as well. I get to attend those things as well, which is fantastic.
right.
And yeah, I think a lot of when it comes to the originality that you're talking about, I mean, thank goodness for online film festivals that are still going on, and you get to see so many things that you would never see otherwise and just get
Right.
to experience those. I mean, some of it is streaming through your online festival, but
Right.
it's still a really nice treat to be able to just sit down and watch something you never would see otherwise.
So before the pandemic, I was working in Manhattan, near Union Square, and there was the Tribeca Film Festival in full swing.
Oh yeah.
And they had the Tribeca screening room, which was for about 2 weeks. It was my second home. I would just go there straight from work. It was amazing, and I just again the in person, that experience. We need that. We need to come back to that. There's a few theaters in the New York area, in my area in Queens, that have closed down or that are
Mhm.
or are about to close, and it's just very depressing.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
but we definitely have to keep things alive, and I'm optimistic. Even you know, like what you do, which is what I respect a lot, is shining a light and a microscope on these forgotten films, these smaller gems that nobody knows about. You know, you're really doing a really good service here. And I try to do that as well with my recommendations. You know, I'm a big 80s sci-fi nerd. So
Nice.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it was a
So
glorious time for sci-fi.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I was born in 1985, so I got to see the movies from the 80s later on.
Hmm.
But I ate all that up with a spoon. It was just amazing, amazing time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to go see The Last Starfighter
Mhm.
and, the Indiana Jones films in the
Yeah.
theater and all that. I mean, it was really very special. And then, yeah, I mean, VHS was a savior even in the middle and late 80s. I mean, there were films that just would come out and disappear so quickly, and then they would become hits on VHS, like
Yeah.
Highlander. That one was kind of saved by VHS. Nobody really saw it theatrically, and here it is on VHS, became a big hit.
Right. A side note, they filmed that final duel in Silver Cup Studios in Queens.
Yes,
Yeah.
very
I
nice.
get that. That's awesome. Oh, and by the way, before we have a few minutes, I just want to get your take. What are your thoughts on the new Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny?
I haven't watched the trailers just because I like to be surprised when I go
Okay.
into things.
Hmm.
But I'll tell you, I'm not a big fan of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Hmm.
I am a big fan of James Mangold, and I'm curious to see what he's going to bring to this table. I'm kind of glad they somewhere Mutt got lost. I really didn't need to see more Mutt in this movie, but
Yeah.
but I will tell you, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Before years before it came out, I wrote this big piece about
Hmm.
all of the different scripts for Indiana Jones that were floating around,
Hmm.
and what we got theatrically was way better than what we almost got. So we
Okay.
dodged a bullet with
Yeah.
that POS. We still dodged a bullet. So I am cautiously optimistic about Dial of Destiny,
Yeah.
though I don't know what a bar of soap has to do with Indiana Jones.
Nicely done, sir.
Thank you.
Um, I mean, I do like Shia LaBeouf, but if he were to don the fedora, I don't know if that would have worked at all. So I'm glad that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Um,
I
we'll
like him as well. I kind of run hot and cold on that guy, but like
yeah,
things like what was it, Honey Boy that he was in?
that was very
Like
good.
I really like that. Yeah. And he can do some great work, and then he can
Right.
do, Transformers films. So where are you gonna go?
We need more Peanut Butter Falcons. We really,
Exactly.
I love that movie.
That was fantastic.
So, are there, so we just have a couple minutes, but are there any other projects other than the projection booth that you're currently working on? Anything you can talk about?
I still do the occasional audio commentary for things. I just turned in one for something. Well, I just read that it's going to be out at the end of March, so it's got a pretty quick turnaround time. I've been asked to occasionally. I'll still do like a writing assignment. So there's a essay that I am sorely behind on about some films from the filmmaker Peter Watkins that I'm supposed to write to contribute to a book. So yeah, there's still other projects going on out there, but I mean, the podcast keeps me so busy when I'm not doing the actual like paying gig. But
Right.
it's such a labor of love that I just, it really fulfills a need that I have to try to be creative and just connect with people and have these conversations. Sometimes it's just like you get done recording an episode and you're just like, wow, that was such a great conversation.
I know, and
And
you want to ride that high as long as possible.
exactly. And you just hope that it comes across to the audience, and you hope the audience goes, "Oh wow, I learned a lot," or "I had a good time listening to these folks." And I try to just really craft the conversation and be like, "Okay, here's, we're not just going over into, tangents like crazy. I'll try to like keep it on target if possible,
Right.
and just let people know like this was a lot of fun to do, and I hope you have a lot of fun listening to it."
Yeah, it's all infotainment, right?
Exactly.
Awesome, awesome. So before I let you go, how can people listen to the projection booth? How can they find it?
Gosh, any place you get podcasts, we are there. Or you can go over to our website, projectionboothpodcast.com, and it's where we keep all the show notes, all that stuff. We also have a link to where you can buy the physical media. So if you want that, that's right there. So, and any of the songs that we use, any of the links to the folks that we have on the show, those are all available at our website.
Cool. And I definitely saw that you have a store, a link to a store on your website for T Public, which is
Yeah.
a great t-shirt company who they do great graphics of classic films. And I might get that. There's a Nicolas Cage t-shirt that I have my eye on. It's beautiful.
Which one is it?
It's the one where it's bees versus vampires kiss, and he's
Oh, nice.
and it's like
Nice.
below that the different versions of Cage.
I've got the one where it's today I'm feeling, and it has like happy, excited, and then there's one that just says bees.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Well, maybe Mike, in the future we could have a little Nicolas Cage show, because I always love discussing Rage Cage and all that fun stuff.
Oh yeah, he's so much fun.
Yeah, he's great. Years and years of film, decades of film, and yeah, I'm never gonna get bored talking about Nicolas Cage for sure.
No, no, no. We're having a challenge this year. I'm going to be covering Raising Arizona and trying to find people to talk to about that movie, like the filmmakers and
Okay,
actors and stuff. A little bit of a challenge, but at least I
sure.
know somebody that just wrote a nice book about the Coen brothers, so we'll have that. But it's also tough to talk about comedy sometimes because it's just like you feel like Chris Farley, where you're like, remember that scene? That was funny.
Well, Raising Arizona is a brilliant film, brilliant comedy, and again, yeah, Nicolas Cage, Coen Brothers. I mean, you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
There's so much to talk about with the Coens as well. But Mike, I want to thank you so much for tonight. This was a really great time. I want to, you're a wealth of knowledge, and I look forward to hearing your future shows. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing. It's great, great work.
Thank you so much, Randy. I really appreciate this.
Sure. Thank you so much for being here. This is great. So, guys, I'm Randy Unger. This has been Unger the Radar. We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.